Gaku Kitada is a spineless nerd who got into an elite school on scholarship because of just how smart he is. Gaku has always had an interest in math right from his childhood. It's basically all he knows how to do, which is what made him the #1 pick. His school signed him up for the annual Math Olympiad exam, hoping he would easily be able to bag the trophy. But on the exam day, our boy chokes and literally ends up leaving his answer sheet blank. The next day, the principal and other members of the board confront him about this. Apparently, the school has always taken first place in the Math Olympiad since it was founded, but Gaku went and broke that streak, so the principal is really pissed off. Gaku just wanted to be a great modern-day mathematician, but now his dreams have been crushed. Now he spends most of his time working as a chef at the school cafeteria. He believes that even if he's able to get by with the scholarship money, he would still need to work part-time to support his dad. Otherwise, he would just be a burden. If there's no other complications, he should be graduating in about 6 months. His co-worker named Ayu hears his sob story and admits that it's kinda sad. She previously heard rumors of Gaku being the super smart guy in school, so she never expected to hear this kind of thing. As for herself, she's aspiring for a sports scholarship to the school and is still on the waiting list, so she's just working here to earn some allowance. That aside, she asks Gaku to tutor her dumb nephew since he's so smart, but he's not exactly cut out for teaching. He finds cooking to be an easy and effortless task, so much so that he can even zone out while cooking. While Gaku cooks, he accidentally squirts some ketchup on his face. Ayu panics and offers to wipe it off immediately, but Gaku himself isn't bothered in the slightest. He just continues to cook. Then at that moment, a light-haired guy in a hood walks into the cafeteria and spots the delicious meal Gaku just finished preparing. Gaku is done cooking, so he serves some to Ayu as her complimentary staff meal. She takes one look at it and her mouth starts to water. She's never seen a staff meal look this delicious before. She takes her first bite of it and her taste buds go on a roller coaster of adventure. Then all of a sudden, the hooded guy from earlier walks in and requests the same meal he just served her, but Gaku shuts him down, saying that meal is only for the staff. The hooded guy doesn't care about that. He picks up Gaku's plate and starts to devour it, and after he's done, he pats Gaku on the head like a dog and walks out nonchalantly. Later that day, Gaku has another meeting with the principal in his office. The news just broke out to him that Gaku has refused to join the upcoming Math Olympiad exam. Gaku is the top student at the school, so the principal and the board of directors feel that this would be the perfect competition for him to show off the school's strength, and also an opportunity for Gaku to redeem himself from the previous competition that he choked out on. But Gaku has already made up his mind. Because of what happened in the last competition, he feels that he doesn't have what it takes to stand out in national math competitions. After this is said, Gaku apologizes and walks out. The principal is really pissed. He slams his fist into his desk. As he walks down the hall, he runs into a group of 3 young individuals, and the one in the middle looks the most familiar. Before they cross paths, the guy in the middle asks Gaku for directions to the principal's office. Now that he takes a closer look at the guy, he recognizes him as the same guy who waltzed into the cafeteria and stole his staff meal. He warns him not to try that again. Gaku asks him what class he's in. The guy replies, saying he's not a student there, he's actually here as a chef. Apparently, the principal invited a bunch of important people for a catering service. They're currently looking for the principal, just to say hi to him. The guy in the middle suddenly switches up and says he doesn't want to see the principal anymore. He's more intrigued to see the kind of person Gaku it is. In the next scene, they both are seen in the kitchen together. The guy apologizes for his rude behavior today and offers to cook something for him. As they spend time together, Gaku learns that this guy is only 23 years old and he already has his own restaurant. He's really envious of that. The guy tells Gaku not to sell himself short though. Gaku is smart enough to enter the Math Olympiad exam. Just then, Gaku receives a phone call from his overexcited dad, who called just to ask him how things are going at school. Gaku tells his dad that he's been able to maintain his grades, and with the look of things, he would likely be able to get into Tokyo University. He promises his dad that he'll find a high-paying job eventually after he graduates, but his dad tells him not to worry about it. He wants Gaku to get a master's degree and study abroad. He'll find a way to pay for it. Gaku's dad knows just how much Gaku loved doing math as a kid. He believes it's his job as a parent to support his dream. The call ends and the light-haired guy places a bowl of Neapolitan right in Gaku's face. Gaku is surprised to see that the Neapolitan is already ready. But before he can dig in, the guy stops him and mentions that Gaku has really caught his attention of late, so he went as far as doing some research. All his classmates and teachers agree that he has lost his formidable aura ever since his incident at the exam. He looks Gaku dead in the eyes and tells him that he hasn't realized the amount of potential he has. Gaku finds this situation to be really uncomfortable, so he changes the subject and says he just wants to eat now. This guy spent so much time yapping that the Neapolitan he spent all that time making has become soggy. He plans on eating quickly and then leaving. Gaku takes one bite of it, but at the moment it hits his taste buds, it takes him on a roller coaster of adventure. How on earth could soggy noodles taste this good? Gaku has to know how this was prepared, so he asks him how he did it. Just then, a call from Ayu interrupts and he immediately gets up to leave. The guy walks away and looks back at Gaku, saying he thinks his Neapolitan noodles are better, which is why he specifically didn't use the method he did. Gaku is left speechless and in utter disbelief. The guy is just about to walk out, but before he does, he introduces himself as Kai. Then he leaves the room. With that being over, Gaku picks up Ayu's call. She's at school and is in a state of panic. She sends Gaku a picture of the school bulletin board that shows Gaku has been expelled. The school wants Gaku to return the scholarship money and are expelling him just because he won't participate in the school math Olympiad competition. What's he going to tell his dad that's working so hard to pay for his tuition? The principal looks down at Gaku as he kneels in the rain and tells him that he hates being humiliated more than anything in the world. Him handing in a blank paper during the exam brought nothing but shame to their school. Not to mention they lost a lot of sponsorship donations because of what he did. They even gave him a second chance to redeem himself with the upcoming math competition, but he trampled all over the principal's effort. The principal walks away saying there's nothing Gaku can do to fix this. He has to return the scholarship money. Ayu sees all that just happened and is about to run over to him, but Kai comes out of nowhere and beats her to it. Later that night, the principal is having an important meeting with some important guests. His school's reputation is on the line, so he can't afford for the food he serves them to be trash. Because of that, he invited the best chefs in the city. And as they walk in, the principal introduces them one by one. The guests drop their jaws as they find out that Kai is a gourmet chef and he's only 23 years old. Kai is also the owner of the infamous Chef K restaurant, which is a one-star restaurant in the city. The guests gasp as they hear this. The principal proceeds to glaze Kai unnecessarily, but the guests only get more and more impressed. Shortly after, the maid hands over the menu to the principal. He looks inside and is shocked to see that the main dish is Neapolitan noodles. The principal knows that's a very basic dish, but he still decides to trust Kai on his decision. In reality, Kai actually kidnapped Gaku and is currently forcing him to make a large batch of the noodles. Gaku can't handle this much tension, so he has a nervous breakdown. He feels he's a nobody that won't amount to anything. He's not worthy of cooking for the principal's important guests. Ever since the Math Olympiad, he feels his existence is pointless. Aya sees that this is really getting to Gaku, so she suggests they go home, but Kai interrupts, saying that if he sits his ass down and makes some delicious Neapolitan noodles, he guarantees that it would be able to change his current situation for the better. Kai gives him two options: to continue living his so-called loser life in peace or hold onto this glimmer of hope that could change his life. Gaku hears that and thinks about how hard his dad worked to get him this far. He can't let him down. Gaku still feels double-minded about it, but he puts on the apron anyway and is willing to cook now. He starts the cooking process but doesn't feel confident at all. He wonders why Kai wants him to make the Neapolitan so bad, even though his version was a lot better. Kai just looks at him with a smirk and tells him that he would need to think outside the box in order for him to make the perfect Neapolitan. Gaku thinks about that and gets a bright idea. He immediately starts to rinse the noodles in cold water and then stuffs it in the fridge. Aya sees this and is confused at would only make the noodles get soggy. Kai, on the other hand, has a bright smirk on his face. Shortly after that, the process is done and the noodles are served before the guests. They are clearly impressed by the serving style, but how will they react to the taste? The guests have all been served the Neapolitan noodles. They stare at it and find it quite disappointing for the chef to have made such a basic dish as the main course. But then after, they take a closer look and notice that these noodles aren't like the common noodles you find on the streets of Japan. Nonetheless, they take a bite of it and immediately widen their eyes in shock at just how delicious it is. They consider all the flavors that were put into that dish and how well they all go with each other. One even goes as far as saying that he could feel new flavors exploding in his mouth as he chewed. However, one of the snotty guests says that the taste of the noodles is pretty decent, but he still prefers high-class cuisine. But then our guy looks down at his plate and is shocked to see that he has already devoured the entire plate. As for the others, it gives them a feeling of nostalgia. Since they were kids, the taste that comes to mind is that ideal creamy taste. Gaku's Neapolitan noodles had that exact taste. The principal just stares at his guests in confusion, wondering why they are so immersed in the noodles. Why would they choose to show humanity at a time like this? But nonetheless, the principal just smirks because he knows he's just using them all. He's going to abandon them very soon. Then after everyone had finished eating, the principal asked everyone whether they enjoyed the meal. They all gave positive responses, saying that they never expected to have been moved by such a basic dish. Kai then leans over and asks the principal whether it would be okay to call in the chef that made the noodles. The principal agrees, saying it would only make sense to thank him for making his dinner with the guests such a success. But just then, the principal chokes as he sees Gaku walking out slowly. Kai then speaks up and says that when he first met Gaku, he had already pushed the quality of the Neapolitan noodles to the limit. Gaku got the order of ingredients perfectly. First of all, he adds the onions, and after what's known as the Maillard reaction takes place, you add the bratwurst and bell peppers. Finally, he adds the pasta and stir-fries with some ketchup. What Kai found most interesting is that Gaku sets the pasta to one side and then pours the ketchup onto the other side directly in the pan. Using this method helps raise the temperature of the ketchup faster, which helps get the perfect tomato aroma. The principal's guests hear it and are in total disbelief. They never expected that something so trivial would make such a difference. One more thing Kai found intriguing is the fact that whenever Gaku prepares Western cuisine, he always adjusts the temperature of the fork to exactly 45 degrees Celsius. This is what amazed Kai from the first time he met him. The guests think about it and admit that when they picked up the fork, it was very warm and comfortable. They believe that if they had a cold fork in hand, they would have felt less comfortable. All in all, they never expected the fork's temperature to be so pivotal. Kai mentions that he heats up the forks and plates in his restaurant as well, but Gaku just does it more efficiently. Kai has been glazing Gaku since he came out, and Gaku is honestly starting to feel a little uncomfortable. But Kai tells Gaku that not everyone would have been able to do this, so it must mean that he's special. Another thing was the texture of the noodles. It felt so soft and refined. To achieve this, Gaku explains that he rinsed the pasta in cold water after boiling, then he marinated them in red wine and vinegar and placed it in the fridge. The guests are even more impressed at Gaku's genius, but Gaku doesn't want to take all the credit for it. So he admits that he only figured out that method when Kai prepared Neapolitan for him. Kai equally admits that he intentionally made Gaku wait for a while before eating so that the noodles would get soggy. After hearing all this, they all stare at Gaku in heavy disbelief. The principal sweats profusely. He can't believe his eyes. Gaku prepares his dishes with meticulous calculations and theory, which is what separates him from the other chefs out there. Gaku is now considered a symbol of education at the Wells Academy. Kai then says this is the exact reason why the principal wants to introduce him to them. His guests hear this and immediately get excited. They start to praise the principal and even say they're going to increase the subsidy and school's funding just for Gaku's sake. The principal is still sweating profusely. He feels really embarrassed by this because it would mean he would be indebted to Gaku. Kai then leans over to the principal and informs him that his VIP guests are willing to support his academy as long as Gaku is in it. So if he refuses to praise him under these circumstances, things may take a wild turn. The principal has no choice but to submit. He bows and thanks Gaku for this opportunity, and just looking at the expression he has on his face, you can tell our guy hates every second of it. After this is done, Kai and his team walk away. Kai looks back at Gaku and assures him that his mathematical way of thinking is definitely meant for cooking, and if they are able to work together, they would be able to do things in the kitchen that have never been done before. In the next scene, Gaku snaps awake from this nightmare in a cold sweat, and immediately heads downstairs and sits with his dad. His dad is a little too excited that Gaku managed to get into the renowned Tokyo University. Gaku urges his dad not to act all excited and surprised because he knew for a fact that he did well on the mock exam. Then after, Gaku's attention drifts to a lady on the television known as Musashi. Apparently, she's a regular customer at the Math Olympiad. She brags and claims that she's going to get a perfect score on the entrance exam. Gaku's dad can admit that she's a baddie, but he doesn't like the fact that she's out there running her mouth. Gaku recalls the instance where he met Musashi in person. She asked him a simple math question, to which Gaku gave a simple answer back. But what she did was what Gaku found so interesting. She literally came up with her own theory to solve the question. From that point onwards, Gaku knew that she was an outstanding person. Gaku's dad sees that his son has started to get mixed feelings about the whole thing, so he rushes into the kitchen and dishes some food out to him. After Gaku has finished eating his breakfast, he thinks about how sweet life with his dad has been. He needs to figure out what he wants to do if he's ever going to be someone important in the future. He drops his plate and immediately tells his dad that he's going to head into Tokyo for a while. That statement takes his dad by surprise, and Gaku can see that, so he reassures him that he's going to be back soon. His dad isn't all that sure about what he has in mind, but he still tallies him to go because he knows this is something he needs to figure out. That said, Gaku spends the entire day traveling alone to the heart of Tokyo, in search of what will fulfill his heart's desire. He arrives at Kei's restaurant and is greeted by Rana, the sous chef. She instantly recognizes Gaku to be the one who made the famous Neapolitan noodles. She walks over to the wine cellar and offers him a glass. As Gaku holds the glass, she informs him that the temperature of all the glasses, plates, and doorknobs have been carefully adjusted for comfort and coolness of touch. The main reason Ran-Na is being so friendly to Gaku is because Kai had already spoken really highly of him in the past. That's where she learned the importance of controlling the temperature. Ran-Na has never seen Kai compliment someone like that, so he automatically earned her respect that way. Ran-Na offers him a seat and says she wants to make a meal for him. Gaku thinks about it for a second and refuses. He knows the average spending cost in this restaurant is like 8,000 yen, and he ain't trying to go broke. But Ran-Na informs him that Kai specially asked her to cook a dish for him when he came and asked him what the principle of the dish was. Kai's orders were if Gaku can convince her with his theory, he should stay here and wait for him to come back. Otherwise, he should take his transportation fee and leave immediately. Ran-Na walks over to him and drops a plate that has really beautiful decoration. He's so shocked by the presentation that all he can do is stare. But before he can dig in, Ran-Na decides to be brutally honest and tells Gaku that it's going to be impossible for him to become a chef in this kind of restaurant. The culinary world is a really scary place, and she doesn't think that someone like him who isn't ambitious would be cut out for it. Then all of a sudden, Gaku interrupts her and politely asks her to stop yapping so he can actually taste the food now. He takes one bite of it and is taken on a flavor roller coaster. A few seconds later, he's easily able to deduce that the dish is mostly made of crab. He finds it really interesting that she combined pork and crab for this dish. As Gaku gives a detailed analysis, Ran-Na can't help but stare at the fire he has in his eyes. Then Gaku does something that makes Ran-Na gasp in shock. He asks for a pen and paper and begins to write math functions for the cooking process of this dish, and after a little while he drafts the perfect formula for the dish. Ran-Na can't help but admit that all the deductions Gaku has made so far have all been correct. However, she decides to give him a final test and asks him what he thinks about the crab. And to her surprise, Gaku is easily able to predict that it was crab roe that was used. A light smile forms on her face. She has found the one. Just then, Kai walks out from the back room and commends Gaku because he was correct about every single part of the meal. He walks up to Gaku and gives him a pat on the back for becoming a rookie chef. Ran-Na and her colleague just stare at each other in shock because they've never seen Kai in such a good mood with one of his chefs before. Gaku tells Kai that ever since the last time they saw each other, he couldn't stop thinking about the deal that he offered. The last time he was able to enjoy simple mathematics was when he was a kid, but now they can put his math to good use with cooking. It's really exhilarating for him. He also acknowledges that he never would have unlocked this side he never knew of without Ran-Na's cooking, so he thanks her for that. Ran-Na looks at him and is surprised he actually took time to appreciate his chef. Gaku isn't really sure whether he wants to be a chef or not. What he wants to know is the reason for this impulsive passion for cooking. Just then, one of the congressmen from the meeting earlier, named Weiichi, walks in reminding Gaku that he was one of the people that tried his amazing Neapolitan noodles and he's been his #1 fan since that day. Apparently, Weiichi became a sponsor of the restaurant because of Gaku, and today is his family member's birthday, so he promised to have Gaku cook specially for him. Kai looks to Gaku with a serious glare and tells him not to mess this up or else. Just then, Weiichi opens the door for his guest. Gaku looks towards the door and sees that it's Musashi, his old math Olympiad rival. It turns out that Musashi is the congressman's daughter. She recognizes him and is surprised to see him here of all places. Gaku lets Weiichi know that he met his daughter in the math Olympiad tournament, but they haven't seen each other since the spring training camp. Now that he thinks about it, Gaku realizes that it makes a lot of sense considering that they both have the same surname. Weiichi tells Musashi that Gaku is the amazing chef that impressed him with his Neapolitan noodles. Gaku hears that and starts to sweat, not knowing what to say, but Kai tells him not to be so modest all the time. He was the one that prepared those lovely noodles that day, so he should act like it. Still, Kai never expected such a coincidence of him and the customer being from the same Math Olympiad training camp. Kai informs Musashi that Gaku makes his best dishes by using a mathematical way of thinking. Musashi hears that and gets shocked. She looks at our boy and asks him whether this means he's given up on becoming a mathematician. Her dad assumes that Musashi would be interested in food that's made in a mathematician way. However, she replies saying that ever since she was a child, she has always been interested in Gaku's mathematical way of thinking. The first time she met Gaku was at the Math Olympiad competition. One day, she gathered up the courage to walk up to him and ask a question. After getting to know him, she was so fascinated by the way he thinks mathematically. Back then, she claims Gaku was filled with unique problem-solving techniques. It looked like he was actually having fun while solving it. However, she doesn't have the interest in him anymore. When they both met again after a long time of being apart, she felt that his mathematical way of thinking had deteriorated to the point of utter boredom. With this, she believes that talking to Gaku from this point onwards would only have a negative effect on her intelligence. Moreover, she doesn't have the slightest interest in food, so she doesn't think there's any reason for her to stay here. She turns her back to leave. But before she can, Kai calls out to her and asks her why she claims to be such a great mathematician when she won't even try food made in a mathematical way of thinking. Gaku realizes that Kai is sticking up for him, so our boy turns that frown upside down and admits that her words did kind of hurt him a bit, but that's fine. His duty today is to cook for her and ensure that it's delicious. He asks her to think about it one last time about trying his food. She thinks about it for a second and finally agrees. Then she's seated with her dad and told that the food will be served to her in about 1 hour. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Gaku is in a bit of a struggle choosing the ingredients to use for the meal. Although he's told he can use whatever he wants, the ingredients here are far too extravagant and he's not used to them. At the same time, Rana is at the front of the kitchen and is currently pissed off at Hoti, the sous chef, for always coming late to work. But Hoti defends himself, saying that he went to get the wine for the dish they're about to prepare. The fact that Gaku is totally ignored makes him realize that Rana was right about the kitchen being a battlefield. The vibe in there is so tense that he can't even ask why questions. But just then, something surprising happens. Kai offers to be Gaku's assistant. He believes that Gaku is still an amateur when it comes to preparing ingredients, but he still promises not to interfere with his ideas. Kai even says he wouldn't mind explaining the characteristics of the ingredients to him. He just wants to see him do his best. Gaku admits that would help him a lot. He plans on recreating Rana's cooking idea from earlier, so he asks Kai to tell him the umami value for each ingredient. Gaku gets surprised as he sees Kai start to write the value for each ingredient off head. Kai mentions that he just knows the approximate value for each of them. He has a general understanding of the other ingredients' characteristics that could easily be found on the internet. After he's done writing, he steps aside to show Gaku the board and says that the dish Rana made consisted of 2 umami flavors, inosinic acid and glutamic acid. He further tells Gaku that if you combine these 2 ingredients, he's confident that he would be able to make a dish that surpasses Rana's. Rana hears that and has a rather confused look because Kai has left out a very important part. Kai looks back at her and urges her not to say a word. It's a simple test he's conducting on Gaku. But just like that, Gaku figures it out instantly and says that there's definitely more than 2 umami components. The staff hear that and are shocked as to how he came to realize that. To achieve the kind of synergy Rana's dish had, there would need to be a 3rd umami component. That's his hypothesis. Meanwhile, Musashi peeks through the door to see how Gaku is faring in the kitchen. Kai congratulates Gaku because he just figured it out. Kai intentionally didn't mention the 3rd component because he wanted him to be able to think and come up with it on his own. If he didn't come to this conclusion, that would mean he was just copying Rana's recipe, and in that case, he would have just told Gaku to get the hell out of there. After that said, Rana pours some oyster stock in a serving plate for Gaku to taste. He gives it a sip and almost chokes when he realizes that the formula he gave for the recipe just now doesn't add up. Rana tells him that this was a double trap set by Kai. The oyster broth was just added to mimic the synergy effect. It was just a pointless addition to throw Gaku off. Kai then speaks up and tells Gaku that for a mathematical brain, his idea is good, but his equation in the real world just doesn't add up. Gaku sees that time is running out, so he starts to panic. He even starts to get flashbacks of that time when he choked during his math exam. Musashi watches from a distance, and although she doesn't know much about cooking, she can see that Gaku is struggling, so she just walks out saying she's done here. Meanwhile, Gaku is focused on a high-class ingredient known as tilafish. Gaku believes tilafish would be the missing variable in his equation, and right as he says that, Kai smiles and says he just figured it out. Gaku writes down the recipe for tilafish, scallops, and prosciutto. That's the only shot they have right now. One of the staff comes to announce that it's almost time to serve the side dish, so they all work as fast as they can to prepare the tilafish. And after it's done, the waitress takes it to the guests to eat. Musashi and her dad take their first bite of the dish and instantly remain speechless at the taste of just how delicious it is. Her dad starts to get really excited because he sees that the perfect seasoning brings out the characteristics of the tilafish. He never even thought it would go so well with prosciutto. Adding rice at the bottom was the icing on the cake. It ties the 2 flavors present in the dish perfectly. This feeling is the same one he felt when he tasted the Neapolitan noodles, the same warm, familiar feeling. Musashi is still breathtaking. She asks Gaku what the name of this dish is. He replies saying this dish is known as okazuke. This was a dish that Gaku's dad often made for him when he was a child. However, it's mostly made on special occasions. Gaku realized that when cooking for customers, he couldn't rely solely on numerical umami values. He needed to trust his own judgment to achieve the best possible flavor. Musashi hears this and actually agrees with Gaku, saying that sticking to laws and values while cooking would only make your process rigid. There needs to be some room for flexibility. Kai then speaks up and says that cooking has nothing to do with the chef's subjective opinion, but rather the customer's subjective opinion. At the end of the night, they all escort the guests to their car, but before they leave, Gaku is informed that Musashi left her notebook inside the restaurant, so he hands it over to her. She instantly widens her eyes in surprise and snatches it out from his hands. After that, she just thanks him for the meal and walks away, all while having a cold expression on her face. As the congressman drives away with Musashi, he tells her that she shouldn't have given that kind of cold reaction to Gaku after he returned her notebook. That was a really kind gesture after all. But little does he know that she's actually been idolizing Gaku this entire time and has a photo of her and him together. Back at the restaurant, Gaku looks to Kai and kindly asks him to let him come and work here after he graduates. The time he enjoyed solving math problems felt like an abandoned childhood memory. He's finally starting to get that feeling back. However, Kai recalls that it was once Gaku's dream to become a mathematician, so he asks him what he plans on doing about that. Gaku says he'll find a way to convince his dad. Moreover, he can attend Tokyo University whenever he wants, but this is the only place he can find that kind of impulse. He wants to open the doors of truth in the cooking world. That said, Kai shakes his hand and agrees to his proposal. After graduation, the students are gathered for a general assembly. Gaku is now the talk in the school. He managed to get into Tokyo University, which is a university with the lowest acceptance rate in the country, but even after doing so, he dropped out right away. At the end of the event, Muomi heard about him dropping out and asks him whether this is something he really wants to do. Muomi secured her admission through the sports program to a university across the country. If he ever encounters any difficulties, she tells him not to hesitate to call her. Gaku's dad knows that his son diving headfirst down a path he's never been down will be difficult, and all in all, he wants Gaku to pursue his dreams. So before he bids him farewell, he tells him to do his possible best out there and not to forget that he doesn't need to go through hardships alone. He has a home he can come back to whenever he wants. With that said, they both say their goodbyes and Gaku hits the road. As Gaku sits in the car, he can't help but feel guilty that his dad wanted him to study and graduate at Tokyo University, but instead he only managed to get the admission. Gaku can't tell what the future holds, but he sure hopes that it will be worth it. In the next episode, Gaku is busy scribbling in his notebook when Kai walks up to him all of a sudden. This startles Gaku. He begins to greet Kai and explains that he even got here 2 hours ago because he's really excited for the plans they have today. Kai realizes that he arrived a bit late, so he apologizes for keeping him waiting. What he finds even more interesting is what Gaku is writing in his notebook. He explains that he's just doing some calculations based on the behavioral patterns he noticed about people in Tokyo. Our boy was so focused on it that he didn't even realize that he was waiting for Kai the entire time. Nonetheless, it's quite obvious that Gaku is really excited to start working. He's willing to put his head down and do exactly as he's told. Kai does like the fact that he's motivated, but still urges him to calm down a bit. Gaku is told to start work at Kei's restaurant the next day, and for today, he's to find a place where he'll be staying. They arrive at an apartment building and climb the stairs. Along the way, Gaku mentions that his father is really grateful to Kai for providing him with a cheap place to stay in Tokyo. It's a really great help because he needs to start paying off his student loans. On getting upstairs, Gaku looks around and is amazed at how spacious the room is. To him, it looks like a locker with a bunch of supplies. Kai lets him know that he can use the kitchen as he likes. Gaku is relieved the moment he hears that because he nearly fainted once he heard the prices of normal apartments in Tokyo. He asks if Rana and Hoti are in the building as well, but it turns out that this is actually Kei's personal home. He's been living here alone for a while now, and Gaku is going to be his guest. Kai isn't sure, but Rana and Hoti are renting a place near the restaurant. They both step into the room and see a 10 out of 10 baddie posted up on the bed. She immediately clings to Kai and complains about how he coasted her after they did the deed last night. Kai honestly forgot they even used this room last night. He plays the nonchalant card and tells her to get out of there because Gaku is going to be moving in. The girl continues to rant endlessly, so Kai just throws her stuff downstairs, after which he looks her in the eyes and tells her to get lost. Later that night, Kai takes it upon himself to personally cook for Gaku a bowl of Neapolitan noodles. After it's done and they both sit down, Gaku apologizes for having Kai cook for him when he's the one supposed to be doing the cooking. He doesn't want to be a burden, so he offers to at least be doing the chores around the house, but Kai tells him not to worry about it because Nene, the maid, already has it covered. Kai tells Gaku not to worry about cooking or housework. What he should be focused on this evening is thinking of how he can grow as a chef by analyzing this meal. He also adds that if he isn't able to come to an accurate conclusion, then he would basically be rendered useless to him, and he'll be fired immediately. Neapolitan noodles was the dish that brought him this far in the first place. Ever since they met and Kai tasted it, he got inspired and was able to add his own twist to his version of it. Our boy Gaku hears this and has a very surprised look on his face. He lifts it on his fork and notices that it doesn't really have a dark red color. However, he can't smell the strong aroma of the tomatoes. He gives the noodles one taste and instantly starts to analyze it from the mathematical dimension. He believes the Neapolitan he made that was praised so much for is nothing compared to the masterpiece Kai just made. Gaku has no choice but to keep digging in. He needs to find an explanation as to why these noodles are so delicious. The secret ingredient is the lobster. When it goes into the mouth, Gaku claims that a very complicated math formula is generated. Gaku widens his eyes at the realization that even with his mathematical way of thinking, there's no way any of the recipes he's ever used would ever taste this good. Kai hears that and has a bright smirk on his face as he tells him this would mean his brain is useless in this case. Kai always wanted him to open the door of truth with cooking, which is why he asked to become his right-hand man. The world of cuisine is unparalleled and unprecedented, therefore, if he doesn't pursue a sense of familiarity, there's no chance of him becoming a chef. His first task is to make meals for all the staff and make sure they're satisfied. Kai can't just let him start serving customers all willy-nilly. He'll need to learn the basics first. This task is going to be a bit tricky because the employees over there are naturally picky eaters, so it's going to be really hard to satisfy them. His mission is to get passing grade from everyone in the space of a week. Most of the people Kai has ever given this task usually end up failing him. With that, if Gaku is unable to meet the terms, Kai would fire him on the spot. However, before leaving, Kai gives him some advice, saying that him pursuing a sense of familiarity in cooking isn't going to get him far. Even though Gaku naturally has the talent for cooking, it's clear that Kai just wants to devour it. That in mind, Gaku cheers up and gives a bright smile, saying he's really excited to carry out this task. That afternoon, Nanan gives Gaku his chef uniform, but he's kinda disappointed because he's been given a tacky white one, while most of the cool chefs he sees on TV are dressed in the black ones. Nanan informs Gaku that he's still a trainee here and all trainees must wear the white chef uniform. Just then, Ran-Na walks in with her chest open. She was planning to use that room to change and didn't expect anyone else to be there. Gaku nervously turns his back while Ran-Na dresses up fully. That aside, he walks to the kitchen, and on his way there, he confidently affirms to himself that he's going to make a delicious meal from the start and get everyone's approval. Shortly after he arrives at the kitchen, he looks around and slowly starts to get intimidated as he sees so many skilled chefs in the same room with him. He processes for a few seconds and musters up the courage to introduce himself to them and says he is going to be in their care for the next week. One of the chefs wishes to test Gaku's ability, so he gives him some potatoes and tells him to dice and brunoise them. Gaku manages to carry that out perfectly, so the chef pats him on the back. He might be capable after all. He looks behind him and sees a giant foreign dude staring down at him. Now that he thinks about it, there appear to be tons of foreign staff in the kitchen. They come from all over the world to learn from this kitchen. The chefs have now confirmed that Gaku will be useful around there. Then they walk off all saying they'll be putting Gaku to good use. Then before they leave, he asks for their names, but they give a shocking reply, saying there's no need for them to know each other's names. Just then, Kai walks in and informs them all that the restaurant has been fully booked for lunch. He urges them all to work as quickly and efficiently as possible. Gaku watches as the chefs work at high speed in unison and is taken by surprise. The chef who praised him earlier ended up throwing his potato slices in the trash because he didn't cut them all at even sizes. Turns out that Gaku initially managed to slice it perfectly, but along the line he started to panic a bit and ended up messing it up. The chef tells him that he doesn't need to worry about it. He can just pack it up and go home. Gaku is so low on energy that he trips over and falls, causing the platter to come down with him. The other chefs pay no attention to him. They just keep cooking while Gaku remains on the floor embarrassed. He heads outside for some fresh air and feels really embarrassed. Aside from skill and aptitude, his major problem is the lack of speed and stamina. He lacks physicality in general. A battle kitchen like that exists for customers and requires speed that can keep up with that. He's only ever spent his time studying mathematics, so he has like zero confidence in his stamina. Just then, he recalls that Kai promised to fire him instantly if something like this were to happen. Our boy immediately gets motivated, realizing that although stamina and speed are important, it's the cooking skills that would matter the most. Kai said that the staff meal he's preparing would be the basis. He figures that it's normal to be unable to keep up with everyone's pace in the initial stages. Just then, Nina walks in on Gaku and her stomach is growling. She tells him that the lunch rush ended a while ago, so it's time for him to prepare the staff meal. She takes a look at him and sees that he's still struggling to walk, so she asks him whether this means he would be unable to prepare a meal that would satisfy them. Gaku starts to sweat. Honestly speaking, kitchen work is already tiring for him. He feels it would be really beneficial for him to observe how the staff makes the food. If possible, he would even like to taste the leftovers so he can at least know what the restaurant is like. This is the task that determines his future at the restaurant, so he knows he can't afford to be careless with it. Mina sees that this task is going to be too much for him to handle, so she just advises that he let someone else do it for them. That piece of advice makes Gaku have an epiphany. He bursts into the kitchen and is about to prepare the staff meal. Before he starts, Nina advises him that the rule for staff time meals is that ingredients and resources can be used freely and without any restriction, meaning that as long as he can make the best staff meal, he can use as many resources as he wants regardless of the cost. However, Gaku doesn't think he'll need to go overboard with some expensive ingredients. He believes that the leftover potatoes, carrots, and corned beef should be enough. He then asks one of the chefs to help him out with the ingredients he didn't end up using for his dish. The chef watches Gaku's cooking process and is shocked to see that he's using the leftover potato pieces from earlier. Gaku plans on working backwards from the finished product and making a delicious meal out of what he's been given. Ran-Na watches him cook and sees the ingredients he's using for the staff meal. It seems like a very ordinary staff meal, but knowing how he is, she expects him to make a really unexpected dish. Then shortly after that, Gaku is done with the food and it has been dished out to the staff to eat. This is the meal that would determine whether he would be able to join the restaurant or not. They take a look at it and scoff, saying that it looks like a very unremarkable potato and meat stew, but immediately after that, they stop criticizing it as they realize that the aroma coming from it is on another level. Gaku musters up confidence and urges them all to try it. Kai just watches from a distance and is eager to find out what their decision is going to be. The staff give the meal a taste and all agree it's really delicious. Ran-Na says it's not just the seasoning. The rich texture of the soup enhances the beef and potatoes flavor. Honi adds that soy sauce is another key factor, saying there's nothing more appetizing than the aroma of charred soy sauce. Honi asks Ran-Na for her take on this, and she says she saw it all while Gaku was cooking. When preparing the meal, Gaku added in salt just at the right time. First, when he started stir-frying the potatoes, carrots, and onions. Then after, he didn't stir-fry the vegetables anymore. Just after tasting Gaku's dish, another one of the staff is ready to give a detailed analysis of the ingredients used and the method of preparation. He starts off by saying the meal contains less than 1% of salt. Gaku waited until the vegetables were dehydrated by the salt, and once they were, the flavor seeped into the vegetables. The process of simmering is what brought out its charred flavor, and not stir-frying the vegetables was the most effective cooking method for this dish. Hodi adds that the thickness of the soup is due to small potatoes being blended into the soup, leading it to have a thick, smooth texture. Gaku erupts with joy and tells the staff that their detailed analysis was 100% accurate. He's happy to be surrounded by people who actually understand the theory of cooking. That aside, Hodi asks Gaku why he chose to prepare meat and potatoes of all dishes. The technique he used could have been applied to other dishes, and the thought of this makes Hodi assume Gaku wanted to surprise everyone by preparing it. Gaku tells them he chose this dish simply because it's the most nourishing. The staff hear that and are all left speechless. When Gaku first arrived, he was surprised at how fast the kitchen's pace was. He knew he wasn't going to last long if he continued like that. But that's when Nina told him that he's not the only one who's tired. All the staff of the restaurant are going to be exhausted, meaning everyone who has to eat the staff meal would be exhausted. Even though high-quality ingredients were available to him, Gaku still wanted to prepare a dish that felt like home. That's why he decided to prepare the traditional symbol of a home-cooked meal, potato and meat stew. He found the answer to make this delicious meal. All he needed to do was work backwards to bring out the hidden flavor of the potatoes and meat stew, a dish he was certain to warm everyone's heart. About 10 minutes later, Nina stands before the staff and tells them it's time to start casting their votes for Gaku's meal today. Gaku smiles, expecting this to be an easy pass for him, but out of everyone there, only 2 people end up voting for him, meaning Gaku has failed. Gaku is in utter disbelief. Kai stands behind and reminds him that he only has 1 week to prove himself or else he's gone. Hodi walks over to Gaku and tells him there was no need to prepare a nourishing meal because none of them asked for it. Hodi considers the world of cuisine to be nothing but a brutal war zone. As chefs, they don't need the nourishment of home-cooked meals, they thirst for inspiration and hints in the staff meal. Hody feels Gaku's style of cooking will never be useful on the front lines of the cuisine world, so he says Gaku will never be cut out for being a chef. Before he leaves, Gaku calls out to him and admits that his dish doesn't have what he's looking for, but everyone said it was delicious. He believes it should be fine as long as the food is delicious. Hody hears that from Gaku and is disappointed in his mathematical way of thinking. Before he walks out again, he tells Gaku that his first mistake was choosing such a simple dish for assessment. 5 days after that, Gaku was in a state of confusion. He didn't know what else he was supposed to do at that point. He used high-class ingredients just like they asked, but every single time they told him it wasn't good enough and just dumped it in the trash. Aside from that, there's a lot of work he wasn't used to doing, so he just kept screwing up and getting yelled at by Hody. Gaku only has 2 days left. His time is running out. Just then he receives a message from his dad. He scrolls up and realizes he's been so busy with the restaurant that he couldn't even reply to his dad each time he texted. Gaku reads the heartwarming messages and starts to feel a little uneasy. What if he just ends up disappointing him after all this? Gaku then hears a familiar voice call out to him. He looks up and sees it's his old pal Womi. Looks like she had a little accident and now has to use crutches for the meantime. She actually came all the way here looking for Gaku since she heard his restaurant was around here, but she didn't expect to actually find him. She accuses him of slacking off, but Gaku tells her that the restaurant is closed right now. It only opens on Wednesday nights. They both sit down on the bench where she tells Gaku how her life's been going ever since graduation. She's been training since March, but all of her competitors are levels ahead of her. Right from day one, she felt hopeless due to the difference in their abilities. But swimming is the only thing she's good at, so she kept on practicing until her body couldn't keep up. She ended up tearing her meniscus badly. She should be back in action after 2 months of healing, but in the meantime, she has to use those crutches to move around. That aside, Womi had a feeling she might run into Gaku, so she packed lunch for him ahead of time. With her injury, she literally had nothing better to do, so she started cooking. Gaku thanks her for the food and gives it a taste. The amazing flavor takes him by surprise, and Womi can tell he recognizes the taste. This dish is a local dish called miso. Her grandma gave her some when she first came to Tokyo, so she figured she would prepare some for Gaku. Gaku feels so reassured by the taste of the food. Womi feels reassured as well because this is a taste she's been used to ever since she was born. But Womi just starts to cry all of a sudden as she gets flashbacks of her past. At first, Gaku is baffled, but later realizes as he gets a flashback of his dad. He grabs Womi and looks her in the eyes. Womi instantly gets shy because she thinks Gaku is going in for a kiss. But instead, he just asks her why she's crying. That's when it hits him. He finally realizes the secret to making a dish that would impress the staff. Womi can see Gaku has just gotten inspiration, so she tells him he can go to the restaurant and carry his idea out. Gaku asks if he can take the lunchbox back to the restaurant and Womi agrees. He then runs off while thanking Womi for all she's done for him. Later that evening, the staff are talking about Gaku and how he only has 2 days to prove himself. Since Kai was the one that recommended him, they honestly were quite excited. But now that they've met Gaku, they just find him kind of disappointing, but Ramna still believes he'll pull through. The others even expect him to be too frustrated to come back to work. But they open the kitchen door and are surprised to see Gaku arrived a lot earlier than they did. Hode walks over to Gaku and sees that he's using math theories and formulas to map out today's dinner rush. As usual, the restaurant is fully booked, so the staff begin to work at maximum pace. Heifer and the others are quick to notice that Gaku isn't as sluggish around the kitchen as he was before. He's a lot faster and more efficient with his tasks. Hode takes a look in Gaku's notebook and sees that his mathematical model is what's helping him move around so freely. At this point, Gaku realizes on the first day he was surprised at everyone's fast pace in the kitchen. As a force of habit, he wanted to find a formula and pattern in the staff's movements, and that was his biggest mistake. He realizes he can't just focus on the staff's movements alone, he has to observe the dish's movement as well, and then recapture it with polar coordinates. If he can master that movement, he's certain he would be ahead of everyone else here. Hode sees how swift his movements are and can't believe his eyes. But all this swift movement is really taking a toll on Gaku's body. He's starting to slow down again. He walks for a while and almost slips, but Hode catches him, admitting that he really exceeded his expectations today. However, his advice to Gaku is to let his body learn how to fight and not just rely on data. Gaku admits what Hode said is true. However, he believes he'll be just fine as long as he has his data. Hode hears that and shudders in shock. Gaku asks Hode to just give him a little more time to train his movements. He thinks improving the kitchen efficiency is something worth looking into. At the end of the evening, dinner hour is over, so all the customers have gone home. So all the staff are eager to find out what Gaku will make for the staff meal. Gaku, understanding the theory, is nice and all, but what determines his future at the restaurant is the staff meal. Hody admits the potatoes and meat stew he prepared on the first day was a really delicious meal, but he still failed because it didn't get everyone's approval. Hody reminds Gaku that today and tomorrow are the last chances he has to prove himself. However, Gaku is so confident in himself that he says he doesn't even need tomorrow. Kai hears that and is curious where Gaku is getting his confidence from. So he asks him what the theme of today's meal is going to be. Gaku boldly replies, saying the theme is going to be homesickness. Everyone shudders in shock at the moment they hear that. Hearing that gets Kai excited, so he says he wants to watch Gaku's process of making the dish. However, he wants to be the only one to observe by Gaku's side. Kai recalls Gaku saying he won't even need tomorrow's chance, so he tells him that if he doesn't pass today, this will be his last day in this kitchen. Outside, the other chefs talk about Gaku, and feel he's come to realize why the first day's potato and meat stew didn't get everyone's approval. The fact he talked about homesickness only proves that. Meanwhile, Gaku has started to prepare his dish while Kai watches. While cooking, Gaku acknowledges that before now he never looked at people closely. There's a lot of foreigners among the staff, so he never considered the trademark food of their hometown. Instead, he previously chose to make generic Japanese meals. Kai hears that and applauds Gaku for finally figuring it out. To become a good chef, he needs to get rid of the Japanese subjective view. In order for Gaku to succeed today, he needs to avoid the soup food of each country, but must also make a dish that the foreign staff can accept and finish. Having this in mind, Kai is curious about what kind of ingredients Gaku will be using for his meal. Gaku shows him the ingredients bowl and Kai screams out in raw excitement. About 30 minutes later, the dishes have been plated and served to the staff. The staff examine the plate carefully and aren't able to identify it immediately. However, the aroma quickly grabs their attention. Hody is the first to dig into his plate, and the others follow shortly after him. They take a bite of it and are in utter disbelief at how delicious it is. The beef fillet dipped in the vegetable puree makes the perfect combo. But after a little while, they come to realize there's also potato in the dish, meaning Gaku has once again made potato and meat stew. In the very next moment, one of the staff members takes a bite of Gaku's dish and his eyes widen in surprise. Even though it is nothing more than a simple potato and meat stew, the taste still suits his palate perfectly, even as a Chinese man who has used his own country's flavors. Another staff member quickly speaks up as well, saying what she finds amazing is how the beef tenderloin completely melts in her mouth, releasing a deep, concentrated flavor of onions and soy sauce. Gaku confirms their observations, explaining that he allowed the beef tenderloin to fully soak in the essence of the potato and meat stew. First, he prepared a broth made with dried bonito and kelp, then let the beef simmer slowly with soy sauce and mirin, so it would absorb the richness of the stew. At that point, Kai begins to explain further. He says that in Japanese-style meat and potato stew, every single ingredient can usually be eaten just as it is. But when the dish is prepared overseas, there are other ways to bring out the flavor. For example, you can infuse the taste directly into the meat from the very beginning. You place the meat inside a vacuum-sealed bag, pour in the broth to marinate, then heat the bag in hot water set to precisely 56 degrees Celsius. Gaku adds to this explanation, pointing out that because he used tenderloin, the broth's flavor could penetrate the meat evenly. The tenderloin's texture allows it to suck out the air and makes it easier to absorb the broth thoroughly. Kai also mentions that Gaku originally planned to use a thermometer to carefully measure the temperature, but he told him they already had a water bath machine, so he let him use that instead. Hearing this, Hody is left in disbelief. He realizes that the beef tenderloin is not only juicy but also carries the unmistakable flavor of potato and meat stew. Nate agrees, saying that the strong aroma of charred potato instantly stimulates her sense of smell. Hody notices there are black and gray bits inside the dish and quickly recognizes them as charred vegetables, so he asks how they were prepared. To answer, Kai reveals a potato that has been burned completely black, explaining that this was part of Gaku's process. Gaku elaborates, saying the best seasoning for potatoes is actually the smoky aroma of char. First, he grills the potatoes until the skins are completely blackened. Then he adds broth and milk, letting them simmer together. Once the potatoes soften, he mashes them directly with the blackened skin, giving them a unique depth of flavor. One of the staff members cries out in shock, saying that method sounds outrageous, yet at the same time he cannot deny how delicious the potatoes taste. Kai then explains that most ordinary chefs, when cooking for foreigners, would try to prepare something close to each country's local flavor. But Gaku is different. Instead of compromising, he pushed to let everyone experience the true essence of Japanese meat and potato stew in its fullest form. Hearing this, the staff tremble in shock. After that, Gaku admits that when he first had Kei's Napolitan, he was overwhelmed by the difference in skill. He couldn't understand it at first. The Napolitan Kai, once served to the chairman and his guests, had been crafted to recreate the nostalgic taste they remembered fondly from childhood. which was why it impressed them so deeply. It drew out personal memories. But the Neapolitan Kai served Gaku later on was different. That one had nothing to do with nostalgia at all. It was simply a universally delicious dish that anyone, anywhere in the world could find appealing. Gaku continues, saying that potato and meat stew should not rely only on nostalgia either. If there is a method of cooking that can truly maximize its potential, then it could very well become a dish worthy of being recognized on the world stage. He believes potato and meat stew have that level of power, and that is why he wants it to be the key to victory. His true aim was to show a foreigner how incredible Japanese potato and meat stew can taste. Hearing this, Hody and the other staff members are left speechless. But then in the next moment, the mood shifts unexpectedly. The staff suddenly say they aren't actually impressed at all, telling him that he got it completely wrong and used the wrong combination of flavors. Gaku is stunned and cannot believe what he is hearing, his face showing utter disbelief. But right after that, all of the staff burst out laughing together, revealing that they were only playing a prank on him. With the joke revealed, the staff finally decide to share their names, introducing themselves one by one. Afterwards, Hody walks up to Gaku personally, hands him an official staff jacket, and thanks him sincerely for letting him taste the very best potato and meat stew he has ever had. The rest of the staff join in, congratulating him warmly. Meanwhile, Kai quietly watches Gaku, feeling proud. In the beginning, Gaku had relied only on his mathematical way of thinking, but now he has grown and learned how to study people deeply, paying attention to their behavior and feelings. This skill is called anthropology. Kai remembers a chef named Yona who once earned 3 Michelin stars. Like Gaku, Yona also had a background in mathematics, but his notebook didn't just contain recipes. It also held detailed studies about how human taste evolved, along with sketches of natural ingredients. In order to create the ideal dish, he studied every kind of knowledge available. And at the very foundation of everything was the mathematical way of thinking. Kai quietly wonders to himself whether Gaku carries the same kind of potential or if he could ever grow into someone of similar greatness. The next day, Gaku decides to visit Womi's house. He brings her a homemade meal as a thank you gift for the advice she had given him earlier. He honestly believes that it was only thanks to her advice that he managed to get hired at the restaurant. Womi is delighted when she hears this, and with a cheerful smile, she suggests that they go out and eat the meal together in the park. Meanwhile, in a small local bar, an odd scene is playing out. Several customers are becoming increasingly uncomfortable because of a strange man wearing glasses. He's been throwing darts at the dartboard for hours, repeating the same stance and hitting his target with uncanny precision every single time. After every few throws, he calmly walks back to his table, opens up a notebook, and records a series of numbers. The customers whisper among themselves, wondering who this strange man might be and what his story is. At the same time, Momi has just finished her daily swimming practice. As she's packing up, her phone rings. It's Gaku calling. He immediately apologizes for not contacting her more often, explaining that he's been incredibly busy working at the restaurant since he got hired. Curious, Momi asks if he's still making staff meals. Gaku happily tells her the story of how he recently made an omuris topped with a beautiful fluffy egg layer. Just as he'd expected, the staff enjoyed it even more than the potato and meat stew he prepared earlier. Even Hody, who is hard to impress, praised him, saying that Gaku is improving day by day. Hearing this fills Gaku with joy because he can finally feel his hard work beginning to pay off. Later that night, Inoue pulls Gaku aside for a private man-to-man talk. With a serious face, he confesses that he has started to develop feelings for Ranna. He asks Gaku to use his mathematical way of thinking to help him figure out how he can increase his chances of dating an older woman like her. Gaku thinks for a moment and then explains the concept of the optimal stopping theory. According to his reasoning, Inoue's chances of dating her will actually improve if he refrains from dating her for the time being. Hearing this, Inoue doesn't even focus on the details, he's just thrilled that there's still hope. Overjoyed, he hugs Gaku tightly and celebrates loudly. The noise is so intense that Wang ends up hearing them and shouts at both of them to knock it off. At this point, Gaku starts to realize something important. After that first week of crushing despair when he initially arrived, he has slowly begun to improve and grow. Yet even so, he feels he should continue letting Kai push him harder. The problem is, Kai still refuses to allow him to cook for actual customers. For now, all Gaku does is assist the other chefs in the kitchen and continue preparing meals only for the staff. To him, this situation feels exactly like what he experienced back when he was pursuing mathematics, stuck in the same position, unable to advance. The story then shifts back to the present, where Gaku is still on the phone with Womi. With a slightly tired, almost drowsy look on his face, he admits to her that he still feels like a useless person. He tells her that he'll probably end up being nothing more than a chef trainee for the rest of his life. But right after saying this, he falls asleep mid-conversation, still holding the phone. On the other end, Uomi sighs in frustration, annoying that he passed out before she even had the chance to say what she wanted to tell him. Meanwhile, inside Gaku's dream, Kai suddenly appears behind him. He tells Gaku that he is finally going to allow him to cook for real customers. Gaku's face lights up with excitement when he hears this, but his expression quickly shifts the moment he sees who the customer is. Sitting across from him is Musashi. She immediately begins lecturing him, saying that serving the right dish to the right customer is absolutely critical. Serving the wrong dish, she warns, could even end up ruining that person's life. She continues her lesson, explaining that to truly test the value of his cooking in the professional world, Gaku should imagine serving the one person he least wants to face. As if to prove her point, the door opens and Hirose, one of Gaku's old rivals from his mathematics days, steps inside. Musashi stares at Gaku with a cold, dead look in her eyes, demanding that he serve Hirose. The sight of Hirose makes Gaku's mind drift back to his childhood, when they were both at Math Olympiad camp. He remembers how Hirose would always talk down to him, insisting over and over again that Gaku would never become a mathematician. Those memories sting deeply, and now in this dreamlike encounter, they all come rushing back. Hirose begins to slowly walk toward Gaku in the dream, his steps deliberate and heavy. But just before he can get too close, Kai appears, trying to wake Gaku up from his nightmare. Even so, Gaku doesn't wake, his body still twisting in discomfort. Ratanon notices this and suggests they bring him some water to help, but Kai calmly tells her it's fine and that she can go now, leaving things to him. Later that night, Gaku finally wakes up. The first thing he sees is Kai still there in the restaurant, sitting nearby. Feeling embarrassed, Gaku scratches his head awkwardly, realizing he must have been moaning while asleep. He mutters that he was just having a strange dream. Trying to shake off the awkwardness, Gaku notices that Kai is busy cooking something. Curious, he asks if Kai is cooking for him, and Kai confirms that he is. A few minutes later, Kai sets down a steaming plate of eggs over rice in front of him. The moment Gaku sees it, he immediately recognizes that it's based on the staff meal he himself had prepared earlier that day. He takes a bite, and instantly his eyes widen in shock at how delicious it is. The difference is overwhelming. Kai explains that there are two main ways he elevated the dish compared to the one Gaku had made. The first is the aroma. While preparing the meal, Kai added finely shaved white truffles, which release an intoxicating scent that completely transforms the experience. The second is the texture. Kai explains that the perfect mouthfeel is achieved when the rice and eggs blend seamlessly together into one smooth bite. Gaku eats several more mouthfuls and realizes without a doubt that this meal is on a completely different level from his own attempt. White truffles, Kai points out, are one of the key ingredients here. He has noticed that Gaku rarely uses them or any other high-quality ingredients for that matter. So he asks if that choice comes from Gaku's personality, or his way of thinking. Kai then tells him something important. If he truly wants to consistently make food that is delicious, he needs to be ready to use any ingredient available to him, no matter how rare, expensive, or unfamiliar. Nothing should be off-limits. Then with a sudden mischievous spark, Kai leans closer and asks Gaku, half joking but half serious, who exactly he keeps dreaming about that makes him moan in his sleep. Gaku quickly denies any strange meaning behind it, insisting that it's not what Kai is thinking. He explains that his dream was about someone else, his rival, a man named Hirose. Back when Gaku was a child, his greatest wish was to become a mathematician and challenge the world of truth through numbers. But the person who shattered that dream was none other than Hirose. Gaku remembers the Math Olympiad he failed to advance in. At that very same competition, Hirose not only came in first place, but later went on to win the gold medal as Japan's official representative. Kai listens, but he doesn't quite understand the full weight of what Gaku is saying, so he cuts him off and tells him to just get straight to the point already. Taking a deep breath, Gaku explains further. Back in those days, Hirose and Musashi would often study mathematics together, talking late into the night and discussing theories endlessly. But starting from junior high, Hirose began to stand out more and more. He grew so far ahead that even holding a conversation with him became uncomfortable. It felt less like talking to a friend and more like facing a perfect reflection of the self Gaku wished he could be. Compared to Hirose, Gaku says with bitterness he felt like nothing more than a fragile collection of weaknesses, standing in the shadow of someone who embodied everything he lacked. After finishing his story, Gaku looks at Kai and suddenly asks if he has any friends like that, friends who are rivals yet still close in some way. Gaku admits he wouldn't really know, since Kai almost never talks about himself or his own past. The question makes Kai pause and reflect. For the first time, his mind drifts back to his youth. After a moment, he tells Gaku that he once thought he had those kinds of friends too, but he explains bluntly that he defeated them a long time ago, and that is precisely why he stands where he is today. Kai then walks directly up to Gaku and lays things out plainly. The reason he has never let Gaku serve food to customers, he says, is because mathematics is Gaku's only real weapon, and yet he still hasn't truly mastered it. If Gaku cannot overcome that weakness, Kai says firmly he will never allow him to stand in front of customers. He explains that he knows Gaku's type well, someone who only truly shines when standing on the stage directly facing others. For that reason, Kai believes the best training method for him is to cook for someone he is genuinely afraid of. However, he adds coldly he cannot simply invite people over just to benefit Gaku alone. In response, Gaku finally reveals the truth. The person he fears most is none other than Eiichitaro Hirose. At the sound of that name, Kai visibly shudders, his expression shifting in shock. Almost immediately, he presses Gaku for more details and asks if this Hirose has won any awards recently. Gaku thinks about it and suddenly remembers, yes, Hirose has just received the prestigious Masami Kusanos Award. Upon hearing that, Kai quickly pulls out a newspaper and shoves it into Gaku's hands. He points to the headline and explains that their restaurant has actually been requested to provide catering for the very same award ceremony. Kai's eyes glimmer with intensity as he leans in close to Gaku, a wild look spreading across his face. He tells him that this means both he and his rival Hirose will be at the same venue. With complete certainty, Kai declares that this cannot be coincidence. It has to be fate. He tells Gaku that on that day, he is going to be the one serving the food. Meanwhile, far away, Musashi receives a phone call. On the other end is Hirose himself asking her about Gaku and what he has been doing lately. With a casual tone, Hirose suggests that both she and Gaku should come to Princeton, just like he did. But Musashi immediately shuts him down, explaining that her father would never allow it and that Gaku could never afford to study abroad in the first place. Still, something catches her attention, the background noise. It sounds loud, almost like a crowd. So she asks Hirose where he is and what's going on. He laughs and tells her it's nothing unusual. There are a lot of Japanese students at Princeton, and right now they're all just hanging out together at a bar. Then he casually mentions that he'll be returning to Japan soon. When he does, he suggests they should go and see Gaku together. But Musashi responds differently. She tells him that while Gaku might actually want to see him again, she herself isn't so sure. Hirose, however, simply replies with confidence. He insists that the meeting between him, Musashi, and Gaku is inevitable. In his mind, the three of them were brought together by fate, and it is their shared destiny to one day unlock the truths of the universe side by side. This was the end of episode 6. Subscribe to not miss the next part.